So let's kick into the discussion. And I hope I've provided a context for what we're going to be discussing. But maybe if you'll allow me, Nancy, I'd like to start with you. And I'd just like to get your thoughts on what do you think teachers need to do differently to deliver some of the modality shift from what we're used to and the kind of the emergency, we all kind of slipped into the emergency mode of action for online teaching that we all had to do in February, March last year, days that we will remember but hope never to see again, but and moving towards a new reality of socially distanced classroom or classrooms where there are students as well as online, students joining online. What do you think as teachers or as academics do we need to be doing differently with those?
Thank you for this question. I think it's really important when we consider that youth mobility has been so disrupted that their identities have been disrupted. And so as educators, one of the things we can do is help them articulate this next normal, which is a permanent disruption, articulate their resilience, articulate their sense of belonging. And the practical ways in which we talk to educators about how to do this relates to being extremely explicit in our expectations. If they're going to be engaging in new modalities online through new learning management systems and gamifications like Kahoot, then they need to know why they're doing those things. How does that help them get at the learning objectives? And if you're one of those people that doesn't like learning objectives, then just what's the purpose of the exercise? Everything has become much less intuitive to our learners. And with youth mobility and online programs, our learners have become much more diverse. Even diverse in their experiences managing the pandemic. So I think the number one thing that educators can do is dive into the inclusion literature from your region and your educational context. Not just any book off the shelf, but really one that speaks to the context within which you're in, and try and figure out new ways to be explicit in your instructions and your syllabi.
That's really interesting perspective. I mean, can I just unpack that a bit more, if you don't mind, Nancy? I like this idea of disrupted identities. I mean, can you tell us a bit more about what you mean by that, or some examples of that? I mean, how has that been manifested, do you think, in what you've observed maybe in Abu Dhabi?
Sure. Well, I mean, the lockdown is over here in Abu Dhabi, thankfully, alhamdulillah. But there are all of our students come with different stories of what they experienced during their various lockdowns, what their families have been through financially, emotionally, health-wise, and who they are on the other side of this, which is not done yet, is still playing out. For our students who were trapped outside of the UAE and are now back, they also had very different experiences. And similarly for our educators and staff. And part of this is about rebuilding our sense of community in each individual classroom and then across our campuses. This comes through allowing students to be themselves in the classroom and rather focusing on the prior experience of your students than on the content. And one of, I think, the mistakes we made during remote instruction was viewing that as a content delivery experience, when really it was a learning experience. For our students. They didn't receive remote instruction as content delivery. That was learning. Whether it was good or bad, we can assess. So thinking about the skills they gained in digital literacy with the learning management systems, in building relationships online, how can we help them transfer this to employability, to managing relationships with their families if they are now away from them, and new ways in which they need to engage with the world around them.
Fantastic. Very, very interesting. And you're absolutely right. I think this hasn't completely played out yet. We haven't really understood the full-fledged impacts of a very different learning experience. I would argue not just for the students, but for the instructors as well, because overnight we all had to adopt very different personalities and different possibly pedagogies and different skill sets way outside of our comfort zones. And maybe what we've been used to. So very interesting, and I'm sure we can come back to that in a minute. But maybe Phil, you can help me out a little here. I mean, with the scholars, the Worldclass Scholars initiative that you've set up, how can that, how did it come about, and what was the thinking? I mean, is this something that happened during the COVID period, or is this something that happened before that? I note that you're focusing on the K-12, but what was the idea there?
Well, it was pre-COVID, long pre-COVID. I mean, I think there were sort of two things that happened that created it. One, that, and not to get too personal, but I grew up in a small town in Alabama, and it's a long story, but I got picked up, and when I was in college, I got picked up and dropped in the middle of Cambridge University, arguably the best university in the world, and it totally blew every fuse I had. I had no idea what I was doing. I was totally over the top, but it changed my life because I learned about another, not just another culture, but global cultures and people from all over the world, and it was an opportunity, I think, that most people don't have, and you can't do it. You can't send everybody all over the world now, but you can do it online. You can connect people in a way that they can develop relationships around learning and exploring. And I believe that global connection between kids from a relatively early age is fundamental. It doesn't matter in our program whether it's about English or math or geography or history. It's about connecting the kids. And once that connection is made, what powers it, and it sounds almost sort of flip and not serious, but what powers it is the kids. It's that connection, that innate curiosity, that exploration, that, who the hell are you? You look funny. That innate curiosity of kids. One of our best teachers said, the reason the program really works is you connect the kids, the teachers act sort of as the guardrails to keep them out of trouble, and then let the kids connect. That's what it's all about, because that's what drives education, is curiosity and challenging. And kids learn, as one of them said, we're all different, we're all the same, out of the mouths of babes, right? And that's what I think the whole COVID experience has taught us, that, everybody says, I think, sort of three things. One, that education has been disrupted by COVID and the implications go on and on. The second thing is all our kids have had the same experience. They've all been disrupted. They've all had their lives turned upside down. And so that's a wonderful connection point to begin to create relationships. And the third thing everybody says is we don't know what it's going to be in the future. But that connection, I think, is the key that can drive so much of the innovation. Listen to the kids. What do they tell you? What's exciting to them? And we think that is the ultimate building block for the new sort of post-COVID education, is begin with what excites the kids among themselves. So,
and at the risk of really showing my age here, I'm going to ask you a question around, I always say we're digital migrants into this world, where those kids are, the digital citizens of this world. They were born with some sort of gadget in their hands.
Sure.
And therefore they're very comfortable with the idea of connecting using technology, which we're all getting very comfortable with. However, I'm just thinking, is it an equitable substitute for a face-to-face? So when you were, transplanted from Alabama to Cambridge, UK, your experiences were multi-sensual. Every level you had to engage with a different culture, different climate, different weather, different people, different habits, all of those things, and that in itself is a learning, experience. Now, from your perspective, do you find that there's enough opportunity through a digital platform to replicate that kind of immersive environment for them to learn from?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, it's interesting but not sufficient. And this is a beginning, and not every kid gets the opportunity that I had. But kids in, pick a country, most of them have 90% of all the kids in Africa live within range of a cell tower. Now, that doesn't mean they all have a cell phone, but that potential is there. And sure, we'd love to take every kid and send them to Cambridge. But in the meantime, let's connect them in a process that allows them to explore other people's cultures and other people's lives. And that ultimately, I mean, so much of the conflict in the world today is, I mean, call it what you want. It's tribal, it's religious tribes, it's geographic tribes, it's ethnic tribes. And, kids learn about each other at an early age with a different attitude than if you wait till they're 19, 20, 21 to expose them to the other world. So, we can't put everybody on an airplane and send them to Cambridge, and we can't even provide everybody with a cell phone. But we can provide them with a mechanism once they get that cell phone to be able to connect. And by the time we get all the world connected, those who don't have cell phones will. So it's a process.
That's a great lead into my next question, if you don't mind, Hugh, because I think that is also a real big topic in terms of access to devices, access to strong internet links, networks, and historically we know that we have had at least a two-tier system of what is available to possibly more affluent elements of society in terms of mobility. Student mobility has not been available to students from less privileged backgrounds, if you like. So what can we do to avoid this becoming another route to an even more inequitous system? Any thoughts or any concerns that you?
Yeah, lots of concerns. I'm not sure. I mean, it's a really valid question. I'm not. Those who've heard me speak or read some of the things I've written about this know that I'm amongst a group of people that some of you might think we're Luddites because we're saying, look, you've got to be wary of this tech. And I admire Phil's evangelism. Don't get me wrong. The fact that we're doing this, as I think Nancy said, since the beginning of the pandemic, I've done online events from Toronto to Shanghai, from Sydney to Berlin, and that's all through the power of the internet. But the reality, let's be quite clear here. The reality is that the majority of children and students around the world don't have any access to online learning at all. And we need to be, I was going to say I'm surprised, but I wasn't surprised. I was just disappointed that two delegates, even yesterday at this conference, from whose institutions I won't name for their obvious reasons, but we're talking that they didn't know anyone that didn't have access to online, and that anyway people could just go and use internet cafes. I mean, this is just, it's I'm afraid it typifies a very weird, if you know the acronym, Western educated, industrial, rich democracies. And it typifies an attitude that says, we've got all this tech, everyone else will get it in due course. The reality is, if you go back to actually something that Phil said, what the students want is to learn together. And that happens face to face, right? And that doesn't need this kind of, what I see as quite predatory circling of the edtech vultures who are around all of us in education trying to basically sell product. And that's all this is about. It's about money making. And, as the saying goes, nature abhors a vacuum. And as soon as COVID came along, so did the edtech software purveyors saying, we've got this perfect solution. But all of us in this meeting today and all the other conferences going on online right now represent very different institutions. And what we know, if we're educators, if we're leaders, if we're thought leaders or educated leaders, is that there is no one size fits all. Phil mentioned Cambridge. I have a quick shout out for Oxford because that's where I went. But, these are top, he's from Harvard, Nancy's from NYU. These are top universities in the world, and they're not the same. And there's no edtech solution that can sort out all of the different problems I have here in Dubai, that Nancy has in Abu Dhabi, that Phil has in Atlanta and elsewhere. So I think we need to be a little bit more honest with our dialogue. And instead of saying, this is the new normal, we've all gone online. Actually, we haven't, right? We're not doing distance learning. What we did is, when the pandemic hit, we shifted content online. And I say this from a position of 15 years of experience, because I lectured for the Open University in the UK, which is the biggest purveyor of online education in the United Kingdom, similar to Phoenix, Arizona in the States. And they are really good at what they do. So don't kid yourself that you're suddenly an online purveyor or that you're a distance learner. Just like you shouldn't kid ourselves that parents suddenly became teachers overnight because they had to homeschool. They didn't. That does a huge disservice to teachers around the world that have trained for years to do what they do. So I'm a little bit skeptical, I'm afraid, of this idea that hybrid will fix everything, that kids are underneath a mobile telephone mast, so that means they'll have access. Go to sub-Saharan Africa. You may see the mast. It was probably put up by China. It will have no bearing whatsoever on the education of the children in that neighborhood, because getting a mobile isn't just enough. The mobile itself is expensive. Getting access to internet is far more important. And if only we in the West and in other rich countries put a lot of the money we're wasting on EdTech into developing comms for other countries, we might be having a more reasonable debate.
Well, look, I mean, what a wonderful and very frank and reflective, actually, response to what I knew would be quite a provocative question. When
you know me, Yusra, sorry.
Can I, Professor Yusra, can I respond a little bit there for a moment, if I may?
Come on in.
Great, Hugh. I really like your points, and I think there was some great low-tech solutions, like delivering lessons via radio to communities that couldn't get printed textbooks. Sometimes these sorts of solutions were interesting. It's one way, but it's better than nothing, some people thought. And I do think that, proctored exams, personally, I'm not in favor of that approach. So thinking about how we ensure academic integrity through alternative assessments that are efficiently marked, but not through proctoring and measuring the learning rather than measuring the cheating. How about that? But I do think there's a place for the technology that connects us with youth mobility. Does it leave other people further disconnected? Absolutely. Is that a reason not to use it for everybody else? I'm not sure. So I agree. It's the pot is only so big in each country to spend on education. And here in the UAE, we're very fortunate that education is well funded and able to be well funded. I think that, though, with youth mobility, if the airlines have closed down, which they did, and getting from point A to point B inside a country is difficult for whatever reason. This isn't just COVID, right? 6 months before COVID happened, there was a shutdown at University of Pretoria, 2 universities in Lebanon, at the University of Hong Kong, for social unrest reasons. All of them had to go to emergency remote instruction. The likelihood that as university professors, we will dip in and out of that reality for the rest of time now that we've done it is likely. And I think it would behoove us all to invest in education that makes that business continuity possible. And sometimes that's technology.
I would completely concur, actually, Nancy, and it actually picks up one of the questions from the audience there about, this is a reality now. As you say, we can't now just turn around and pretend it didn't happen and let's all go back to on-campus teaching and face-to-face and everything, because we know that this is this opportunity. I mean, I talk from personal experience. I wouldn't be able to be at this conference if it wasn't online. I just cannot afford to leave the office for 2 or 3 days, even if it was held in Dubai or whatever. I just simply can't afford to be away from the family and from the office for 2 or 3 days. So it does open up wonderful opportunities, not for everybody necessarily, but it does open up. But the question we have to think about is what alternate options are, and this is from somebody in the audience, what alternative options are available to us, and how can we meaningfully utilize those and globalize them? If you think about the growth in higher education over the years and how that has become relatively more accessible to a huge portion of the population, what can we do? How can we think about new, maybe more innovative ways where we can engage? I mean, Nancy, you mentioned the Lowtech options. And I know where I was in Oman when this kicked off, there was use of TV channels to deliver some of the lessons, because not everybody could have access. Well, Oman is very, very well served by IT and infrastructure, but it's the download speeds and it's the consistent network that is sometimes challenging. So we know that there are those kinds of options. But what else could we be thinking about? I mean, open to anyone really, and any ideas of great practice that we should be sharing.
I mean, I'm gonna leap in and be more controversial, if I can, just because I just want to pick up something Nancy said, which I agree with, and you mentioned it just there, Yusra. This what we're doing now. You and I couldn't do it; we wouldn't have the time to travel. My simple reaction is academics need to stop traveling. Right? I don't think that international conferences that we all used to attend are necessary. Nothing to do with COVID. I don't think they're right for the climate. I would much rather spend my limited budget on sending students around than I would with academics. The fact that we've all been on so many conferences and we're, supposedly adults, we can cope with it. I genuinely believe the study abroad options, the face-to-face, the junior semester abroad, as it used to be called in America, junior year abroad, these are hugely important. And I would rather invest in that and figure out ways for student mobility in the old-fashioned kind of low tech, if you can call it that, than I would with the vast number of conferences that we've just got rid of in face-to-face during COVID. And I don't think we need them back. I don't think we need to send all our engineers to conferences in the University of the West Indies and the University of Honolulu, as lovely as they are, because I have a feeling that is not necessary anymore. And
I bet you're very popular with your staff, Hugh.
I bet I am. Exactly why I get asked to do these panels, because it keeps me away from people who would probably want to string me up. But no, I'm genuinely serious. I think need to meet each other still, and we have to find ways to do it. I'll give you a practical example. 2 weeks ago, I led a party from my university. We sponsored the Intercontinental Spelling Bee. Sounds very unusual. Americans will know it. It's not perhaps as familiar in Europe. And this is a big spelling bee across most of Africa. We had about 50 students who'd gone through their finals in all over Africa, from Ghana, from Nigeria and South Africa, who could travel. Plenty from Rwanda, Burkina Faso, Burundi and others couldn't come because of COVID. But for those school children coming to Dubai for 3 days to be judged by me and my staff, to do their spelling bee, to meet us, each other, that guarantee you that low-tech solution, even though it was really difficult for them, and we had to help them, we had to sponsor them, and the travel wasn't easy, but that was a heck of a lot better than had we said, hey, let's just do it on Teams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can I make a point that we tend to get polarized about this answer or that answer, and I don't think it's a answer. I think it's a whole bunch of answers. Hugh made the point, which is very valid, that a lot of people in Africa don't have access to the cell tower. Well, a lot of people in Africa don't have access to get on an airplane, fly to Dubai, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't do it. I mean, the market is going to drive and is driving access. I mean, it's a simple fact of economics of the world that the market is driving access and putting devices in people's hands. I don't think it's my job to try to do that. My job is to try to piggyback on that and surf that wave, if you will, to get into as many schools as we can, as quickly as we can. And it's not about saying that this is the only way. And until everybody in the world can do something, nobody should do it. I think it's a process of selecting what we can, experiment. If it works, great. If it doesn't, throw it away and do something else. I mean, I think it's this sort of bold, relentless experimentation, which is what needs to be driving the innovation, and not sort of my own personal bias or intellectual construct about what it ought to be. It ought to be about the innovation and experimentation and bold, radical, if you will, experimentation, because what seems stupid or radical or outrageous today becomes mainstream tomorrow. And the quicker we can get there and understand that this is going to work or that's not going to work, that's what we got to do, is drive that innovation.
Can I?
And I think if I can, sorry, Yusra.
sorry, I just wanted to build on that. One of the kind of the main drivers for mobility programs historically was to kind of expose students to different cultures, different parts of the world, refine language skills or improve language skills, and get a better understanding, to avoid, the conflicts that are, or help the younger generation to avoid the conflicts that are, so prevalent in our parts or different parts of the world going forward. Now, one inherent part of that learning process has been the resilience that these students pick up because they're put in situations outside their comfort zones. So I'm just taking off a question that we received from the audience. Resilience is key. How can it be integrated in the ecosystem of higher education? And I think particularly now, resilience and understanding different viewpoints as one element of resilience, being able to accept and understand and be flexible is really very important. And if we live in our sheltered environments that we only see other environments through a screen, is that going to give us the type of resilience that we need? And maybe just something for us to consider. And I don't know, Nancy, if you wanted to pick up on that. How can we build that? How can we embed it into our programs?
Yeah, I think especially where international travel remains limited for the most part, connecting this resilience with the study abroad issue we had earlier mentioned, is that we can explore community-based learning in our own backyards. To the extent that our communities are open, there are multiple ways in which people live in societies that are different right around us, anywhere we are. It's very unlikely it's all the same everywhere around you. There's different religions, different socioeconomic moments, different sections of the city, urban, more artistic, waterfronts or lakefronts, whatever's in your area, mountains. So I think the resilience can come from experiences abroad in different places where we're testing our inquiry and analysis, our intercultural competencies, our ability to assess people through a new lens and different ways of living. So that's a form of resilience that comes through study abroad education, but we can have it in any form of community-based learning. To the extent that some museums are open and students live near them, there's so much story of resilience in artwork, and we don't always connect it to our course content in the general education spaces, but we should be. And so I think while study abroad is extremely important, and I wish without the carbon footprint that everyone could experience it, I do think that there are other ways to have community-based learning without having the carbon footprint or the opportunity for travel due to COVID-19.
I'm wondering what, and this is just an open question, what role industry could be playing in supporting this, a revised and then maybe a new engaged exposure, because we take students from a purely academic environment and try and plonk them to another purely academic environment. Now there are obviously internship programs or placement programs and non-formal and informal, opportunities for learning, but this is another avenue to augment possibly the student experience by opening up closer links with industry to help with this ability to be able to be mobile, not necessarily being mobile during your study period, but as an opportunity going forward to be able to mobile, having that kind of broader set of experience. And I'm not saying taking an accounting student and putting them in an accounting firm to apply their accounting skills, but something slightly more broad and more and I don't know if you have any experiences of taking somebody out of a comfort zone and putting them in something quite different to help with the resilience, to help with the exposure, and to help with the understanding. And Phil, you look like you had an answer for me.
One of the things that we do, we have a fair number of corporate sponsors who support our project. And one of the things we do is, for example, General Motors has a plant in Flint, Michigan. Well, we connect them with world-class scholars with with schools around a General Motors plant in Oaxaca, Mexico. And the kids have the same, quote, General Motors linkage, but they're different. One's Mexican, one's U.S., etc. And by bringing the companies in to, quote, sponsor it, they become engaged. They invite kids to participate in things in their factories, see what it's like, send their employees to volunteer. So, it's not simply a one-way street to kids into businesses. We think this is a very interesting and productive way to connect schools around the world, but use the backbone and framework of business to help do it.
Yeah.
Seems
what a
to work.
wonderful example. Yeah, what a wonderful example. And actually a relatively easy model to set up, So I know we don't have all that long left, and I keep getting, kind of time indicators, but I don't want to leave without spending a little bit of time talking about staff mobility. Now, we know your views on going to conferences, Hugh, but I think there is a wider angle here. And I think, we talk about staff-student exchange. And in my introduction, I talked about some countries being importers and others being exporters of these exchange programs. But I do think it enriches the career, for starters, of the staff member, irrespective of whether it's academic or non-academic. And it also enriches the experience for the recipients, i.e. the students, or the institution in which this individual is operating. So I'm wondering whether now that more institutions have access to online or hybrid versions of delivery, is that something that we can leverage more usefully? Could we be doing exchanges with the British University in Dubai and New York University, Abu Dhabi, and Cambridge and Pennsylvania and whatever? Is that something that we now need to think about more carefully, or are we just about getting ourselves together with our own kind of delivery? I mean, what are our thoughts about this, and how can we, leverage this opportunity? In my view, it's a great opportunity, and I think we need to be a bit more brave about going forward with something like this. So anything you're doing, possibly, Nancy, that you wish to share on that one?
Sure. Well, there is a consortium of universities in the United Arab Emirates that's working with the Al Ghurair Foundation in consultation with various government representatives to consider what would be possible for accreditation for online programs in the UAE. There's obviously an interesting opportunity for economies of scale around the general education courses that all universities are required to launch and deliver. There's differences in the types of students we have, though. And so I think ignoring that distinctive nature of our student bodies without adjusting the pedagogy might be a challenge, but that I definitely think we should ride the wave of all the digital literacy we've gained to figure out efficiencies with the given resources we have.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to pick up one question from the audience, and it does actually link nicely with, utilizing all the digital literacies and tools that are available to us. And we have a question around what role can VR, virtual realities, and maybe even AR, augmented realities, play in replicating, if you like, that feel, that a sense of being in a different part of the world, and how that, I mean, is that something you've used in your initiative, Phil? Or
no,
no?
We haven't, but we want to. I mean, we one of the beauties of our program is that we connect the schools, and then they work. Our process is called Connect, Learn, and Share. The Learn is a joint project where the two classes from around the world pick something and work together on that project, and then share it with their community and their schools, with their family, etc. And we have had schools that have tried to do things with VR, but it's all in the experimental state. I mean, it's kids, hey, I got an idea, and then they try something, and that's what we are all about encouraging. The VR, as I said, we really hadn't used it in any structured way. We've seen some kids try stuff and they get excited about it, but they have a hard time sort of taking it beyond just me and my goggles and you and your goggles. I mean, it's sort of limited if every kid's got to have his goggles on. But it's got great promise. I mean, I think, education, again, I'm not a professional educator, but I've spent my adult life in and out of classrooms at all kind of levels. And they're all very, it seems to me that this traditional models that we have been using, we pretty much got to the end of its usefulness. And we've got to be radically bold in our experimenting with other stuff. Because now whatever works, we can now share it. That's the big idea here, is that whatever works, we can now share instantaneously around the world, and that's pretty damn exciting from my perspective.
Very much so. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think the options are endless. I was watching a very short news piece the other day about the use of virtual realities and augmented realities with football players, because of the damage that has been found to be incurred because of headers. As they take more headers, they with time it affects their brains. So now they're using virtual realities and augmented realities to do the training, as opposed to actually doing it on the field. So that then when they are on the field, it just reduces the injuries to these players and prolongs their lives. So I was just thinking, wow, this is it seems like such an obvious thing now. But if we were to kind of think about those kinds of things in our world, and what could we be doing with some of our engineering students, what could we be doing with some of our medical students, our art and design students, and all of those. But look, we could be talking about so many opportunities and initiatives that we could be launching in. But I'm very conscious of time. So what I would like to do is to ask each one of you to give us your prediction for, and I know this is a difficult question, I'm being cheeky now, but your prediction for what's the future of mobility, student mobility and staff mobility in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think? Maybe we start with you, Hugh.
Yeah, and I should just say, of course, I'm slightly in jest about saying academics shouldn't travel. It was just, I think if we have a choice, I'd rather students did. Of course, I want to travel, and you know why? You asked me about the future. I'm optimistic. Universities have been around in the West, my own one, for over 1,000 years. Here in the Middle East, much longer. People used to travel vast distances to get to Casablanca, to get to Ouagadougou, to get to Timbuktu, to talk to other people, to share knowledge. Right? And, if we listen to all the doom mongers, the university is dead, COVID has killed the university, we don't need classrooms, VLE will do it, AI is the future. It's all nonsense. If that was true, fine. I'll give the students their degree and a piece of paper, like a receipt, and I can send it to them via blockchain, and that's a transaction. But that's not why I entered education. I'm not interested in transactional education. I'm interested in transformational education. Why do students come to university, and why will they keep coming to university for more than 1,000 years? Because they meet each other, they talk to each other, they argue with each other, they fall in and out of love with themselves and with knowledge. They learn about different religions, sexualities, genders, politics, all the theories that we do face to face. And I agree entirely with Phil. As I said, I'm not a Luddite. The technology is fantastic if it's a servant to the purpose. But believe me, when I'm long gone and my rant is over, there will still be bricks and mortar universities, and there will not be AI robots in the classroom telling people how to interpret Molière or how to understand string theory. It just isn't the case, and that's why I'm optimistic.
Fantastic. Well, you heard it here first. Universities are here to stay. The bricks and mortar is here to stay. Phil, your thoughts. What do you think? Are you agreeing with Hugh, or are you taking a slightly different stance?
No, I agree with you in that, universities are here to stay, simply partly because they're just such wonderful institutions to go and sit and learn about the world. I think that one of the things that has been a guiding principle of my 30 plus years in technology and innovation and stuff is a quote by Henry Ford, who invented the modern assembly line process and automotive as we know it. Somebody asked Henry Ford what people liked or wanted in their cars, and he said, if we'd asked people what they wanted, they'd said they wanted faster horses. Well, we're looking for faster horses, and that's not the future. We got no clue. There's some kid right now in Kenya who is developing something that in 6 months could have 100 million users, and we got no clue who he is, what he's doing, where it's going to come from. But that's going to be the future, and I think in education in all parts of life, we've got to accept and learn that it's not 2 or 3 people sitting around in a university who are going to drive the future. It's the kids who are going to drive the future, and the way they're going to do it, their tools, is the technology. And if we don't embrace that sort of change, then we do end up limiting what we can do as a global community. I mean,
yeah. Thank you, Phil. I agree, and I think the kids are the ones who are going to drive the future. I'm just hoping that this kid in Kenya or wherever is a she rather than a he, as I'm a president of a wedding.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Let's hope we see more of them around. Nancy, what are your thoughts on where we're going with all of this?
Sure. Well, perhaps provocatively, I disagree. I do think we have fundamental changes coming to the majority of higher education, not necessarily elite higher education, but where the cost of education no longer is worth the education piece of paper you're receiving and you can't service your debt. I think it's immoral for those schools to keep taking the money. I think we're seeing a shift to industry as educator, regardless of automation, because of the disconnect between the skills we need in the workplace and the skills and competencies that universities are delivering. And I don't necessarily think that universities should shift to focus exclusively on employability. It's just a reality of the situation. And I think the reality of the situation means that hiring credentials are changing. Youth mobility will help give students, or even adult mobility will help give humans the opportunity to be globally minded, intercultural, and develop learning strategies and skills. And that is what they will need to thrive in the next normal, whatever that may be. So I think universities have a role to play, but they're already not servicing billions and billions of people. So maybe we can find something other than the brick and mortar solution for them that's magically accessible. And hopefully that young woman in Kenya will produce that for us. But in the meantime, I do see a shift that may impact mobility for education's sake.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you all colleagues on the panel, Nancy, Phil, and Hugh, for your thoughts, contributions, and real engagement with the topic. I think what we've seen today is a deep felt reflection on our very new realities and some of the moral and possibly ethical struggles that we all have to deal with. Whether it is, our carbon footprint, and whether it is our, access to technology, whether we're developing a 2-3-tier system of technologically enabled education systems. These are, very soul-searching questions, and I don't think any of us have a fundamental answer. And as Phil said, it isn't an answer; it is a number of answers that may be utilized in different situations. What I do know is that we can only grow if we're together, if we continue to have discussions, if we continue to have open debate, if we respect each other's perceptions, judgments, views, and build on those as we go forward to get the best for what we do as educators and for our colleagues, for our students, and for the good of this world that we're trying to operate in. So I think we're absolutely smack bang on time. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely rest of the day and obviously rest of the conference. Again, sincere thanks to all those people who are backstage helping us make this happen. technologically aided, of course, but thank you all, the administrators behind this conference. And I now hand back to Edna for the, for the mic, please. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thanks all.